Sometimes, the truth can slip out of a child's mouth without them even realizing it. My nephew managed to reveal something, without saying a word, that forced his dad to make some life-changing decisions. In July, my brother Chris took some time off work, mostly to focus on renovations. He and his wife had been wanting to update their bedroom and bathroom for a while. Chris decided to tackle it himself, partly to save money and partly because he actually enjoyed the work. I'd swing by from time to time, just in case he needed an extra hand or a quick errand like picking up painter's tape or screws. One day, I finished work earlier than expected and dropped by Chris's place. At the time, he wasn't doing any renovation work. When I walked into the kitchen, I saw his friend Dave sitting there too. "So, what's going on here?" I asked, feigning seriousness. "Dave, are you here to help or just distract him?" My attempt at sounding stern only made them laugh. "He's here for moral support," Chris said, sliding a plate of sandwiches toward me. "Take a seat. I'll pour you some tea. He's off today." Dave chimed in, "Yeah, Mr. Stay-at-home Dad today." "Wait, what does that mean?" I asked. "You got a dozen neighborhood kids dropped off for you to watch." "No," Chris laughed. "My boy looked at me this morning with those big puppy eyes and begged me not to take him to daycare. So I caved. He knows how to get what he wants." He clung to me so tight and said, "You're the best dad in the world." "Smart kid," I said. "He's 4, right? Already knows how life works." "So, he hit you with the best dad line and that was it." Chris chuckled. "Hey, once you have a kid, you'll understand what real purpose in life is." "So, is your wife coming home soon?" Dave asked. "Think we have time to toss back a couple of beers?" "Why not? 1 or 2 wouldn't hurt," Chris said. Dave dashed off to the store, and Chris and I went to check on my nephew, Ethan. His playroom was a total disaster zone. Exactly what happens when a 4-year-old has half an hour to spread out every toy. Cars, stuffed animals, foam swords. Everything was piled up in the middle of the floor. Ethan was happily scribbling away, perched on his little green chair, working at a small table on what appeared to be a masterpiece. The moment he saw me, he jumped up, ran into my arms, and started excitedly telling me about his day. Mostly, he went on about how he stayed home with Dad instead of going to daycare. He handed me his toy cars, showed me his drawings, and talked a mile a minute. "So, this is a cat, right?" I asked, pointing at some scribbles. "I see 2 orange stripes." Ethan grinned and pulled over another picture. "This is the orange house cat," he said proudly. "Great job, buddy," I said. "And on the second page, are those bunnies?" Ethan shook his head. "No, those are Pagey's." He ran to the window and pointed to the backyard. "Out there." "Oh, pigeons," I said, realizing he had been watching them outside. "Makes sense. I should have figured that out sooner. And how about this one?" I picked up another sheet that showed 2 stick figures shaped side by side. Each had a circle for a head, with arms and legs sticking straight out. "Maybe that's Mom and the bigger one's Dad, right?" Ethan walked over, took the paper from me, and shook his head. No. You gotta do it like this." He rotated the paper 90 degrees, so the figures were lying horizontally. The bigger one's Mom, and the smaller one is Dad. I was still confused. "Mommy, Daddy's friend," Ethan explained. "Who's the friend?" Chris asked, sounding uneasy. "Your friend?" Ethan answered, pointing toward the kitchen. "Uncle Dave," Chris clarified, but his tone sent a chill down my spine. "Yeah," Ethan beamed. "Mommy's friend," pointing to the smaller figure, then to the larger one. I could see the alarm in Chris's eyes as the weight of the situation started sinking in. At the same time, I realized that a 4-year-old doesn't just create random drawings. He's drawing what he actually sees. The cat, the pigeons, they weren't just fantasies. That meant we needed to approach this delicately. "Hey, bud," I asked gently, "where did you see that?" I was hoping it was just some made-up story, the kind only a toddler would create. Ethan ran to the kitchen and pointed at the small corner bench. "Dave sits there," he said. I tried to dig deeper for more details. "No, Mommy." He patted the seat. "Mommy here. Dave." He drew an imaginary line above the seat, indicating where Dave was. It was so clear now. Dave was on top of Mommy's head. I was still struggling to understand. Mommy laid down. Dave showed her how to wrestle. Ethan continued. "Wrestle? Why?" I asked, but Ethan didn't seem to care. "I don't know. I was asleep. Then I woke up for water and saw Mommy and Dave." Chris's face turned darker with each word Ethan spoke. I could see it now. This was worse than I'd feared. Chris tried to force a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, buddy, show Daddy how you wrestle," he said, trying to change the subject. Ethan, eager for attention, told Chris to lie down on the corner bench. Then he climbed on top of him, pushing down with all his might. "Like this, see? That's a choke hold, Dad." The kid was thrilled to have our full attention. Chris, clearly trying to distract himself, picked Ethan up and carried him to the window. "Look, there's a crow, a tree, a swing," he said, trying to shift the mood. "Can you draw the yard for me?" Ethan happily agreed and scampered off to his drawing. I caught Chris's eye and saw him drop the act. Quietly, he slammed a fist on the table, cursing under his breath, and stared out the window. A couple of minutes later, Dave returned, carrying a grocery bag, presumably the beer. He set it down by the doorway, started taking off his shoes, but stopped when he noticed the looks on our faces. "Hey, Dave," Chris said ominously, stepping toward him. "My nephew was just telling us about some wrestling moves you and my wife were practicing. Care to demonstrate?" Dave, realizing he was in trouble, tried to make a break for it, but in his panic, he misjudged and slammed his head against the doorway. The impact knocked him out cold. Whether it was fear or adrenaline, the guy collapsed instantly, sprawled across the entryway. Chris muttered, "Used to call himself a friend. Wonder how long they've been wrestling. This scumbag doesn't belong in my house." "Where does he belong?" I asked, feeling sick for my brother. Chris didn't hesitate. "Right in the trash." He wasn't kidding. We hoisted Dave up, carried him out of the apartment building, and dumped him by the dumpster out back. We found a broken stool nearby and sat him on it. Of course, an unconscious man can't balance, so Dave slid off the stool and into a pile of potato peels. We nearly died laughing, but managed to haul him back up. We rummaged through a bundle of old clothes left by the dumpster, likely for homeless people. We grabbed some pants and tied Dave to the stool so he wouldn't fall over again. The setup was far from perfect, but it kept him upright, more or less. As we stood back to survey our work, ready to head home, Chris's wife, Alice, rounded the corner on her way back from work. She froze, taking in the sight of Dave, bound to a stool, surrounded by garbage. Chris gave her a threatening nod, silently signaling her to come closer. She immediately understood what had happened and bolted out of the courtyard. We didn't bother chasing her. We returned upstairs, grabbed the beer that Dave had bought, and set ourselves up in the kitchen to talk it over. "Chris," I said, nodding toward the window, "there's your lovely wife fussing over her wrestling coach." Sure enough, from the window, we could see Alice frantically trying to revive Dave, slapping his cheeks, untying him. Dave slid off the stool and into her arms, but she couldn't hold his weight, and they both collapsed into the garbage. We watched the second wrestling match unfold while Chris opened a beer. It was the messiest aftermath imaginable. After that day, there were endless discussions, apologies, pathetic lies, and accusations. But what do you say to people who are so shameless and brazen? These days, Chris lives alone with his son. He only deals with his ex-wife for custody matters. As for Dave, he's permanently erased from Chris's life.